crucible is a defining moment in someone's life. It's usually unplanned, often negative, but not necessarily the case. Where are my students at? Raise your hands. This is going to be interactive, so you're going to have fun, I promise. Okay, get this. You're at a crucible right now. There's 3 outcomes, and this is the same case with every single crucible that you could encounter in your life. First thing, you're going to lose. You're going to win, and you're still going to lose. Okay, so here's the thing. When a crucible happens, people tend to either go in a place that is very dark, and they stay there. We all know the story of somebody where something bad happened and they have that victim mentality and they're never able to pull themselves out of it, right? We all know that person. Second type of person goes down into a little bit of a funk, doesn't necessarily recover. They live a somewhat mediocre life, somewhat average. They do the thing, you know, they stay close to home, they have the family. Maybe in their midlife they have this wake-up call and they always have that emptiness inside them, right? They're never really able to pull themselves out of it. They're not necessarily happy, but they're not necessarily sad. They're just kind of meh. And then we have that third person. That third person is who I want to talk to you about today, because I firmly believe in some of my conversations with all of you, you all have this type of personality. The third person gets shot down. They get rejected. If you're in sales of any kind or you're an entrepreneur, guess what? You're going to be that third person, because rejection's coming, and it is coming fast, and it is coming often. And you have the mindset to say, I'm gonna keep trying this, right? Like salespeople and entrepreneurs, we're the craziest people in the world because we get rejected all the time and we know it. But that third person, when you get rejected, they get down on their lowest of lows. They could have days, they could have weeks, they could have months, they could have years where nobody understands them. They feel alone, they are tortured inside, and then something happens and they push through to a life of unimaginable joy. And everybody who said that they couldn't do it is now asking them how they did it. My goal today is to show you 4 components and 3 principles that will make you that third category of person. You see, I was born with the lung condition called cystic fibrosis. Anybody familiar with that? Wow. I have never had that happen. So for those of you who did not raise your hand, usually one person's like, does that have something to do with arthritis? Okay, so for those of you who don't know, cystic fibrosis is a genetic disease that basically destroys your lungs. I have a buildup of thick, sticky mucus that I can't cough out easily. It causes infections anywhere from 2 to 10 times a year. To date, I've spent a third of my life in hospitals. I take on average of 30 pills every single day just to digest food. In 2001, I slipped into a diabetic coma that doctors feared would leave me with permanent brain damage. I woke up, as far as I can tell, my brain's intact, but it did leave me with a form of diabetes. So Travis on the podcast earlier, I made a diabetic joke, I'm allowed to. And that being said, I now give myself up to 5 insulin injections every single day. I was up at 4 a.m. to make sure to do enough airway clearance so that way I would have the lung function to be able to talk with you all. And yes, I have done more drugs than Charlie Sheen, except I've never been high. So that's always entertaining. So here's the deal. Here's how infections with cystic fibrosis can happen. I'm doing fine. You guys would never know I have this condition, right? You're like, wow, that's surprising. But here's the thing. Tomorrow morning I could wake up and I have that slight cough in my lungs. And I can feel that tickle. And what would happen is I can go from hiking 12 miles in Yosemite to being bedridden for weeks, sometimes months at a time. And because of the frequent hospitalizations, my veins have completely collapsed, so I had to get a port installed in my chest for immediate IV access. Now, we all understand something called antibiotic resistance. There are 5 drugs out currently right now that I can get access through my IV, and I'm allergic to 3 out of the 5 because I've developed this resistance. So the entire thing I'm talking to you about today stems from a combination of neuro-linguistic programming, selling techniques, and life within a hospital. Did the math a couple years ago, and so if you were born today with cystic fibrosis, you can expect to live about 37 years old. At 31, my life is 83% over. So statistically, I've got about 17% left if I was absolutely born today with this condition. And I remembered thinking, I was 25 at the time, and I was in charge of setting up the West Coast division of a Boston-based biotech pharmaceutical recruitment firm, and I was in charge of all sales, all operations, employee number one on the West Coast. And I bought my first house at 22, making 6 figures, corner office, great cars, everything. And my lungs had gotten so bad that I had this moment where I realized I would not be alive soon. And I checked into the ER with a consultation of a friend, and I learned my lung function's at 37%. And I remember very clearly, the doctor's walking out, the nurse hooking up the nasal cannula, and they send in a social worker. And the social worker said, "Klyn, I'm so proud of you." I'm like 25, 26 at the time. And she goes, "I'm so proud of you, but you've had a good run. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to really just resign from your job," and I'd come to terms, that's what I was gonna do anyways. And she hands me a stack of paperwork and says, "This is how you get on Social Security Disability Services. This is your last straw." And I quit everything. Never heard from those CEOs again. They liked one of my YouTube videos, so we're good. But I'd never heard, it's actually true. So I signed the papers. I hired an attorney, the best one in the biz, and we went on Social Security Disability. My income now living in Southern California is $1,300 a month, which then leads to a series of couch surfing off of Craigslist and doing odd jobs to get Amazon gift cards, because you can't legally make money on disability, right? It's this whole crazy thing. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what am I gonna do with the time I have left? I can't do sales, I can't do recruiting, I'm done. So I do the bucket list, I go to Vegas, I dance on tables, I get on a Harley with a guy and I ride around rural Iowa. Crazy, but fun. I should do it. And I start really thinking about, where do I want my life to go? What do I want my legacy to be? Is there such a thing as a legacy, or is this just some kind of bullshit term we tell each other to make ourselves feel good, right? And so I remember a time when I was 17. At the time I was hospitalized at the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics. And it's prom season, so ladies, this is a big deal for us, right? This is like our rite of passage. And I'm in the hospital and I'm getting hooked up to all my meds and my nebs and blah, blah, blah. And MySpace was cool. If you guys don't know what it was like premature Facebook. And all of my girlfriends are showing photos on MySpace of their prom dresses. It hurt really bad, because I knew I'd never get to go to prom. And I remember the nurse walks in and she says something along the lines of, "We've got options for you today, sweetie. Would you like your anti-nausea meds with breakfast or with lunch?" I was like, how is it that there are women out there that get to pick their prom dresses, and my decision is if I want anti-nausea meds with breakfast or with lunch? And I was pissed. I was like 17, rage, right? And I'm crying. I'm a victim mentality at this point. I'm bawling hysterically. It's not fair. Why don't I have the normal life that all these other girls have? And my mom notices my pity party, as any good mother does, and she goes, "Klyn, you deserve it. You've had every opportunity. You can have as big of a pity party as you want. But you've got half hour." She literally set a timer. And you know what she does 30 minutes later? Guys, this is cruel and unusual punishment. 30 minutes later, she puts me in my wheelchair and she rolls me up to the 7th floor burn unit, where I had to meet other women who lost most of their bodies to fire. I smelled the decaying flesh. I talked to a lady who was tied to her bedpost. The house was set on fire after her boyfriend raped her and left her for dead. And I realized in that burn unit, there were multiple types of personalities happening. There were women who would never, understandably, recover from the trauma they went through. There were women who were like, "All right, I'm just gonna go back to my day job after this." And then there were women who were like, "I'm gonna create something out of this experience and give meaning to my life." And that was where the obsession with crucibles came from. The crucible that you are all in right now. One of the things that absolutely fascinated me, I'll never forget it, the woman who was left for dead, the entire time I'm talking to her about my stupid problems about prom, I couldn't help but notice how happy she was. And I didn't realize what was gonna happen with my life. I had no idea that I was gonna write a book and go on to do any of these things. But I remembered being fascinated by happiness and these crucibles, and I'm like, I gotta figure this out. So in the 2 years I had left, from my hospital bed, I wrote that book. Literally, I got on LinkedIn, I'm a LinkedIn maven, you can check it out, and I just started sending messages to all these famous people that one day I dreamed maybe I could be like if there was any hope. What made them happy? How are they successful? How are they fulfilled? And I figured out there's actually a method to this stuff. Like there's systems and processes. Can you tell I'm a ringleader? There's systems and processes that go in to making you happy. And entrepreneurs and salespeople, by the way, are typically the least happy demographic. But that's not the case anymore. Take a guess. In a recent Harris poll, what percentage of Americans consider themselves happy? Throw it out. Come on, interactive. This is a depressed group. I was right. I heard somebody say 1%. I'm like, damn. Okay, no, close. 33% of Americans consider themselves happy. So raise your hand if you're happy. Okay, so everybody, of course, is going to raise because they're like, I don't want these people to know I'm not. But the thing is if you raised your hand, there's a good chance that the person to your left and your right don't consider themselves happy. So what are we to do about it? That becomes the question. You're welcome, I have the answers. Okay, there's 4 principles of happiness, okay? Now, any one of these principles will dramatically transform your life, but here's the deal. If you put focused effort into all 4 of these categories, you will have that life that goes from I wonder if they can do it at all to I wonder how they did it. And that's the life we're all striving for, right? That's why we're entrepreneurs. So the first thing is perceived control. I don't know if you guys can see this, but the point is with your iPhones, you can take a photo. I don't do PowerPoints. If you want any of these, I'll give you a number to text later, and you'll get the infographic. Okay, so perceived control. In 1978, there were a bunch of scientists that got together, and they're like, okay, can we test what happens when a crucible moment happens to determine relative happiness levels? And what they did is they went with 22 lottery group winners, 22 non-lottery group winners, and then 28 paraplegics, quadriplegics who lost their limbs in a sudden unplanned event. We're going to chart their happiness levels over time. Don't ask how they found these people, I have no idea. Okay, so the first group, they win the lottery. Yay, life is good. Second group, they don't win the lottery. Third group, lose their limbs. Get this, 6 months later, after they charted these crucible moments, their happiness level defaulted to where they currently were at when the study began. Weird. So how does this relate to you? Some of you are going to go home not with the trophy, right? Some of you aren't going on. Most of you aren't going on. If it sucks, that's okay. That's a human condition. It's okay to experience the negative because statistically, 6 months from now, you're going to be fine anyways. It determines what you do with that crucible. Now, if it's amazing, which for some of you, this is going to be like, I've made it, life is opening up, look how bad I am. Get this, 6 months from now, however you're feeling today, not today because today is a high energy day, however you were feeling last week's probably going to be where you're at anyways. So that confidence is going to get shot down. And some of you are thinking like, how is she a motivational speaker? Don't worry, I'll get to that. It's not all negative, okay, I promise you. And then the same thing with the paraquadriplegics. But here's what's interesting. The worst in my world, if I lost my limbs, like I'd be devastated, right? Like, can we agree that that's some pretty horrific stuff? They actually wound up happier than both the control groups 6 months later. They defaulted back, but then they started to push through. So adversity and these losing moments, or these moments when all is on the line and you don't make it, big picture, long term, you'll actually be happier. Fascinating stuff. Perceived control. Next one is perceived progress. This is a fun one. Who plays video games? Yay, we got one person. Okay. What game do you play? I have no idea what that is. Okay, do you have lives in that? Okay, you have to think on if you have lives in that. Okay, well, we'll try it. You know, whatever. Here we are. We can think on our feet. How many lives do you typically have? Like opportunities to win the game? You're done. Okay, give me somebody who has a video game with 3 lives. Mario Kart's, anybody ever played that? Know what it is? Shut up. That kid's like, what's that? Okay. So here's the deal. You can work with this analogy nonetheless. The older people know what I'm talking about. So you're playing a video game, and you've got 3 lives left, right? How are you feeling on that 3rd life? Anybody shout it out? Yeah, you're a little nervous, but you're optimistic. You're like, I can do this. We're going to be fun. This is going to be great. And then what happens? You're playing against a toddler, and the toddler beats you out. Now he agrees. Okay, there's 2 lives left. Now, what's your nervous factor doing? What's your name with the maroon? Yeah. Ray. So what happens when you're at your 2nd live? You're a little nervous, right? Like you went from being like, I can do this to, oh gosh, now it's got another life. Then the toddler kicks your butt again. What are you at now? 1 life? And how are you actually feeling? Anxiety. All right, how many of you know what that one thing that you should be doing in your business right now to grow it is? We all know what that is, but we're not doing it. Why? Because we forget that life is not a video game. We currently right now have 1 life. And we have no anxiety. We're just ambling through it, hoping for the best. But if you take that nervous energy that you have, as if you're playing a video game, not his game, because he's got unlimited, so it doesn't count. You're welcome. And you take that nervous energy and you actually fuel it towards something that means something to you, you're going to tap into an unlimited energy source. This is how entrepreneurs can go 24 hours without sleep. They are psycho, I get it. Because they've tapped into their sense of urgency and their sense of time. And it doesn't need to end. So if you know that one thing, if you are lucky enough to know what that one thing is that should change your business, should you actually ever get around to doing it, you need to remember your sense of urgency. New Year's Day, why am I sharing this with you? You're welcome again. New Year's Day, I live in San Diego, we're walking down the harbor, my fiance and I, and he's telling me about all of his resolutions, and he is by far the opposite of ringleader, the idea guy, right? And I'm the ringleader. And we're walking on the harbor, and he's like, I got this idea, this is my resolution. He's like naming like 100 of them. And I'm just like caught up with how silly this sounds. And I go and I say, you know what's funny about resolutions? And I was like, most people who make them, there's a good majority who won't even live through the rest of the year. And he goes, don't put that in your speech. That's a shitty motivational speaker right there. And I go, but it's true. How often are we actually thinking about that? And there's a way to take this as empowering, or there's a way to take it as sadness. There's a way to take what's going to happen to you at GSEA as empowering, and a way to take it as, I wasn't good enough, this wasn't for me, something's happening. But you know what? Everybody thinks you need to be motivated to act. How many times do you hear that, right? Let's get motivated and then we'll go to the gym. Let's scroll Instagram, right? I get it, I've done it too. But here's the thing. Is motivation does not cause action. Action causes motivation. Flip it and watch your life change. 3rd component of happiness is something called connection. This is why I personally love EO, because we understand what it means to connect to another human being. And not in the, I hope you're having a great day kind of way, because that sucks. Okay, so here's the deal with connection. How many of you have your parents that live farther away than you? Wow, quite a bit. Deb, do you mind if I pick on you for a second? Okay. How old are your parents? 70s. Okay. And where do they live? San Diego. You're welcome. And that being said, anytime you visit, we're going out for martinis. Okay. That being said, how often do you get to see them? Twice a year. That's actually about average. We're going to go into connection. Statistically, the average life expectancy right now is 78. If her parents are 75 and she sees them twice a year, she doesn't get 3 more years with them. She gets 6 more times with her family. You tell me that you go to San Diego again, you're not going to make the most out of those 6 times? Now, what do you do if you take that same energy to the people you see every single day? How many of you are married or in a serious relationship? Raise your hand. Okay. Out of that, how many times a day do you say, I love you? Probably constantly, right? That's what you do. Hey, baby, I love you. Do you realize that over time that loses its effect? But if you say, there's a difference between saying, I love you, and saying, I love the way you tilt your head back when you laugh. That's connection. I remember meeting Jake when I was about 13, and he was 6 or 7. And at the time at the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics, we would all go downstairs to the basement to work out, and actually the downstairs area was right next to the morgue, so it had an extra heightened sense of our mortality. And Jake was always, it's true, and Jake was always on the treadmill facing me. So here's the treadmill, and then here's my new friend Jake. And what we would do is, so I have to force myself to cough. So if you guys see me at the gym later and you're like, that's disgusting, I know, I don't like doing it either, but I want to live. So when you have cystic fibrosis, you force yourself to cough to get out that infection, right? So Jake and I would always run on the treadmills next to each other, and we'd compete to see who could cough up the most mucus, because that would mean one of us will live longer. And one day, it's gross, I know. And one day, Jake came in, 6-year-old boy, and he's wearing the nasal cannula, and he's carrying his IV pole. And I was absolutely stunned in that second. Because how could he need a mask? He's 6. And I'm like, all right, this is what I gotta do. I gotta go a little easy on Jake today, because I can't process watching a 6-year-old die in front of me. And we start running. And I'm slowing my speed because I'm trying to match his tempo, right? Because I don't want him to at all feel insecure. I don't know what it was. And he looks up at me, and you can see his tears welling, and he goes, one day, I'm gonna run like you can. And Jake was put on a ventilator that evening and died that weekend. And it makes me wonder, how often are we taking the time to appreciate the people nearest us? You know, and I think that hospital hallways have had more sincere kisses than churches and wedding chapels. And the reason I firmly believe that is because we have this sense of what will happen in our lives. And I also believe that the patients in a hospital are the best example of corporate values you could find. Why? Because we all believe in the same things. Love more than we feel loved. Give unconditional support. Don't be afraid to be authentic and express ourselves. And consistently believe there's always an answer. And you watch hospital patients communicate, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram or in their daily interactions, long-term lifers. Those are the people who are in and out of hospitals every year until they die. And all they care about is, are the people going home healthy and happy? Because when chaos happens, or you hear that code blue that says somebody took their last breath, you know for a fact that you did everything you could in the time you had to make their life special. And if you are running a company, if you're fortunate enough to be the CEO, you need to have the same mindset, that the hospital mentality needs to equate to the company. How does every employee go home every day feeling loved, happy, and healthy? Connectedness, third component of happiness. Your fourth component of happiness, we're gonna change that, is actually vision. There's a lot of words for vision, I get it. You know what I didn't tell you about my story is that there's gonna be people in your life that aren't necessarily for you, right? We've all haters, right? How many times have we heard haters? I think Gary Vaynerchuk made that popular. So yeah, Gary, haters. Okay, but here's the deal. There's 3 types of people that's gonna happen. No matter what happens to you at GSCA, you're gonna hear 3 types of people come up. That first type, we're gonna say, are the haters. So these are the people who are like, I knew he wouldn't do it anyways. That chick doesn't know anything about athletic bands. Are you kidding me? Who's she? These are going to be the people that leave you nasty comments. These are going to be the people that you think are your friends and they say things behind your back. You know what? Forget them. It's easy to deal with that. Because you know who they are, right? They don't like you. Cool. Find somebody else to not like. This has no repercussion on me. Second group is your support team. You can do it. You'll get it next time. Don't be afraid. Keep going. You know, have you thought of this? Support team. They're easy. Cool. Whatever. But here's the people you need to be most concerned with. I've dealt with some unimaginable pain, having a terminal illness and being told I will not live to see another hospitalization, because this is the hospitalization where I leave through the morgue. But the worst pain I have ever gone through has been from what I'm going to nickname the average Joes. These are the people who tell you things like, be realistic. These are the people who tell you it's good enough the way it is. Don't worry necessarily about taking that risk. Are you sure that's what you want to do? Are you sure you can do it? I support you, I love you. But I just need you to think about if you really want to move away from home, or if you really want to put yourself out there to compete. Because these people are going to destroy you faster than the haters and the supporters ever could. And these are the people who, when you're lying awake at night, you think, maybe they have a point. And then you wake up one day and wonder what happened to your vision. And you wake up one day and you think, I was so close to having it all. This life is not what I wanted. and it sucks your happiness and joy very quickly, and it comes in the forms of something called be realistic. Never doubt your potential, and forget anyone who doubts you, including yourself. Everybody humor me. Shut your eyes right now. It only works if everybody shuts your eyes. I can see it if your eyes are open, by the way. I'm up here. It's bright. Okay, get this. I need you to take a deep breath. This is called a neuro-linguistic programming technique, and we're doing a pattern interrupt. We're getting you out of that state into another state. So keep your eyes shut, and I need to hear a really deep breath. Just one. Go. Okay, so it is a little cruel doing that because I have not that lung function. So congrats on your lung function. Okay, with your eyes closed. I know, sick, twisted joke, you're welcome. Okay, so with your eyes closed, I need you to raise your hand if you personally have never felt good enough. Keep it up if you've ever had the imposter syndrome. Who am I to think this? Who am I to develop this product? Who am I to create this service? Raise your hand if you've ever doubted yourself. Keep it up, keep it up, keep it up, keep it up. Have you ever doubted yourself? If your hand is not raised, it's okay. You'll come to terms with this. But keep your hands up, and I want everybody to open your eyes and look around the room. Here's where it gets fun. You can put your hands down. Thank you for participating, and congrats on the lung function. Okay, so here's the thing. Every single one of you questions if they are good enough, if they have the imposter syndrome, if they can do the thing. The power that runs through you is far greater than any power that will come against you. And if every single person has their hands up, let me tell you something. This is a human conscious thought. Language was invented around 100,000 years ago, and since the dawn of language, there's been these studies about these uncollective human conscious thoughts, right? So what is it that everybody thinks all the time? So you can dismiss it, because we all think this. How many times do I think I'm worthless? All the time. Cool. Acknowledge the thought and wave it away. It's okay, you can do that. Nobody has to know. So if you get down on yourself after this competition, or after you lose that deal, or after you file bankruptcy and you start to think, gosh, that was right, I wasn't meant for this. I'm not a good entrepreneur. Everybody's better than me. Who am I to do this? Remember, you're human. It's the power of vision, because entrepreneurship is having a vision that nobody can see but you. And there's always an upside to every downside. Don't let that stupid thought interfere with your life. And if you have an average Joe, or you have yourself saying things to cut you down, you need to say your limiting beliefs on what you couldn't do has no bearing on what I can do. They don't know you. Now, here's the thing. Some of you are like, yeah, I practice all this. I'm perfect. Why am I not happy? I mean, why is everybody else not happy? Because I'm fine, right? So there's three things. I'm not going to write down anymore. We're done with this. First thing is there's three types of happiness. These are the components/principles. There's three types. First type is called pleasure. Say it with me. Pleasure. Say it creepy. Come on. Yeah. Okay, somebody's creepy over there. I like that table. So pleasure happiness are like the martinis we're going to have when you come to San Diego. Pleasure happiness is the great food here. Pleasure happiness is how we feel when we get dressed in the morning. It lasts very, very short time. Not a lot of time with pleasure happiness. It fades, right? Like flowers. They die quickly. Second type of happiness is called passion. My passion, let me be very clear, is not to just stand up here and yell at you all. No, not at all. My passion is to think of your life the way in systems and processes that has determined everything about the trajectory of your life. For example, Deb and I were talking earlier, you don't just pick up your toothbrush differently every morning. You have picked up your toothbrush probably the exact same way that you have your entire life. It has never changed. It is a system and a process that you were taught and then replicated on autopilot. It seeped into your unconscious. My passion is to take that unconscious thoughts and your systems and your processes and rewire your circuitry to see an entirely new realm of life that you didn't even know was possible. So when you're stuck on your limiting beliefs or your average Joes, you can figure out a way to fix it. So when I talk about finding your passion, you get into a state of flow. If you find yourself consistently in a state of flow in your business, congratulations, you've found your passion. I have a guy, one of the people I work with, great coaching client, love him to pieces, but he's like, I'm lazy, can't figure out how to get out of laziness. And I'm like, okay, is it progress? And I'm going through all this stuff, and it's like, no. I'm like, okay, what can you do for hours? And he goes, I love Instagram. I just sit there on my phone, and I just flip. And he's like, it's fun, I'm addicted. I can't help it, I'm addicted. I'm like, how much time can you spend on Instagram? And he goes, oh, hours. I'm like, okay. You ever lose sleep over social media? And he goes, all the time. You ever not pay attention to something because you're on your phone? He goes, all the time. You're not lazy, it's just directed in a system and process that doesn't serve you. So if you take that same energy, you find out your trigger, then you can apply it to something that actually serves you and will create intention in your life. You're not lazy if you can spend all night on Instagram. You just don't realize how you can make that serve you. So we built an entire business for him based off getting money off of Instagram. It was an alignment. Find your alignment. Third type of happiness is called purpose. Pretty good, right? So purpose is the way that you can take your story and make it a larger story. This is where all the branding experts come in. Purpose is that thing you do that you can do better than anybody else because it fuels you in a way that nothing else on this planet fuels you. Let me explain. I'm there, I signed the papers, I am legally disabled. I can't make money, I'm searching for places to live off of Craigslist, I'm selling recruiting services for Amazon gift cards, I'm doing some shady stuff, right? And something happens, I get told, hey, do you want to speak about your story? And I'm like, does it pay anything? And they're like, yeah, it pays pretty good. And I'm like, of course I do. And then I realized, crap, I can't. Because the government's going to find out and I'm going to lose everything again. And so I remember going into the social worker's office and I go, I'm going to be a speaker. I need to get off disability. And they go, that's a suicide mission. How are you going to pay for your medication? Did you ever thought about this? Nobody's going to blame you if you stay on the services. It's okay, you've had a good run. This is just what happens to end-stage cystic fibrosis patients. Don't get off disability, that's your lifeline. Be realistic, right? And I go, just because you couldn't do it doesn't mean I can't. I say that in my head, not to their face, because I am somewhat polite. And I say, I'm filing. I hire an attorney, I consult everybody I can, they get me off of disability services. Now I'm like, crap, I gotta make this into a business. Should have thought strategically on that one. So I get off of it and I realize the only reason I have the energy to put my life on the line is because my purpose is part of a larger story. It stands for every entrepreneur trying to get funding that's questioning their potential. It stands for every salesperson that is one call away from their job. It stands for every student who stood up against the other students and said, no, I see a gap, I want to create a solution, and even though nobody believes in me, I have to do this. Even though nobody, very few, get off of disability and end-stage CF with 37% lung function to build a 7-figure business has been ever happened, fuck it. Because that's what it means to have a purpose. I gotta try it. What else am I gonna do? Die? Give in? Be average? That doesn't work for me. If you don't want to settle, do not settle. If you want to settle, fine, do it. Whatever, be happy. Now some of you are thinking, okay, so I've got the passion, the purpose, the pleasure, blah, blah, blah. I've done all of this stuff. Why is it sometimes I'm really upset? Valid question, I hear you. I thought the same thing. Then I found the loophole to this whole entire thing. I'm like, why didn't they just put that at the beginning of the studies? Because you spend your entire life searching for pleasure, then pursuing passions, and then one day, if you're big enough, you'll think about purpose. But the trick that a lot of people have found out, you know, like Tom Shoes, Branson, the guy at Zappos, Tony Hsieh, is they found out if we come from a place of purpose first, and we tap into that energy, then we can give more into our passions, and we can celebrate with pleasures. They just flipped it around. That's all I did. So I'm gonna leave you with this. It's actually the opening to my book. A bird sitting on a branch is never afraid of the branch breaking because its faith is not on the branch, but in its own wings. Thank you.